Hey everyone, it's Evan Kirstel here today with Vinay from Trust Radius, a company I'm really intrigued with. How are you, Vinay?
Awesome, Evan. Good to be here.
Good to be here. I'm in a very high-tech background. You have some very intriguing wood paneling. So where are you? You in the Library of Congress or, maybe in some steamed halls of journalism or what's going on in your office there?
Uh, this is actually my home office.
Oh, very
It's sort of
nice.
a wood panel study, and I think when we bought this house, I always wanted to create like this environment free from media and TV, a place where I could both work, but I've young teenage kids, a place where we could kind of hang out, play chess, read without having media. So excited to
That is
kind
a
of have this
brilliant
free.
idea. I'm going to adopt that one day. So, Trust Radius is a company we're going to talk about, but let's talk about a little bit about you and your background as founder and CEO at Trust Radius and your entrepreneurial journey. Maybe introduce yourself to the audience here.
Yeah, so I'm a Brit living in Austin, Texas. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have two companies counts as serial. My first company was a SaaS company that served the nonprofit sector. We helped them use the internet for communications and for fundraising and political advocacy. And we grew it over a course of 10 years into a public company and
Wow.
then sold it in 2012 to a larger company in our space. And what I was proudest about in that journey was building a culture where people I meet today who are alumni of the company still say it was one of the best places or the best place they've ever worked.
Oh, I
Just a
love
really
that.
great culture. And then we transformed an industry, right? Before I started the company, very little money was being raised online. And then when we exited, we were doing $1.5 billion in nonprofit fundraising just through our platform alone. And of course, we had competition. And so we helped build a market. And then my current company, Trust Radius, I've been at for 10 years as well. I guess I'm a marathon runner. And sorry, I have a little dog here who gets
Oh, bring him
offended.
up. That'd be great. I see he's in your profile. We should check him out. We're very dog friendly here.
Here is Tuttle,
That was awesome.
and
So,
he's adorable, and he's also very dependent on me and follows me everywhere. But he's also acts like a guard dog. So if he hears any noises in the background, he immediately starts barking and growling.
well,
And
guard dogs are welcome. All dogs are welcome here in the show. But so let's dive in because I follow Trust Radius on Twitter, and you talk about truth at scale. Truth is the last thing most of us think about when in the sales and marketing game.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
it's all about positioning and spin and hype and social and PR. So tell us about truth and the importance of truth in sales and marketing.
Well, I think each of us are consumers in our personal lives, right? And so we've grown accustomed to be able to find the real truth about a purchase before we make it in the consumer world.
Mm,
And if whether that's a hotel stay or a meal or a purchase that we make online, the expectation now as a consumer is that the information's out there. I've got a 13-year-old daughter. She wanted a treadmill, and my research journey, consisted of finding kind of like editorial reviews on Wirecutter, part of the New York Times,
yeah.
um, finding niche reviews from kind of running sites, going on Reddit, and then asking my friends on Facebook. And it was the journey of stitching all of those data points together that actually led me to find a machine that was better value, better service, more economic than what I read in the first editorial review. So I think as consumers, if you're diligent, the information's out there to get information before you make a purchase, so you don't make a mistake. And the simple premise behind Trust Radius, in terms of why I set it up, was to do the same thing. The origin story is, with my last company, Convio, we were around 450 people. We made a decision to buy an expensive piece of HR technology. It was like a $200,000 2-year contract.
Mm.
We used the Gartner MQ to figure out who we should speak to. We spoke to the references provided by the vendor. We trusted the salesperson's assurances. And we bought this product and rolled it out to 450 people, then found it didn't meet our needs. And it was like a huge egg in the face moment for my HR team. And it was a mess. And then I dug in and realized that it wasn't unique. We'd made other purchases that we regretted. I spoke to other leaders around Austin and found that, we were not the isolated example of people struggling with technology purchases. And it just struck me that there's such a chasm between how B2B was being bought and how consumer products were bought. And so that's where the inspiration for Trust Radius came. The premise was simple, right? How do you get people to openly and honestly talk about products they've made, purchases that they've made, such that buyers can make a more informed decision? Now, the details of how you make that work has been immensely difficult, but the premise was very simple.
I love the premise. And you've built Trust Radius into quite a player in this space. 1 million buyers using Trust Radius to evaluate business tech. So how are they doing that exactly? What's the process for the seller, the buyer, the reviewer? Tell us about this ecosystem.
Yeah. So we crowdsource the origin of the company is crowdsourcing reviews from practitioners that we reach out to and vet that they are users of the product. So they answer a series of questions, usually 8 to 10 questions. They have to self-identify either through LinkedIn or through a corporate email address. And then we put the review through a screening process to make sure the person in the review seems legitimate. The reviews get published. That content then gets, mashed up into all different forms. So it gets rendered as individual reviews. It feeds our product comparison and alternative pages. Those pages that we then create drive audience. We are an SEO-driven platform. About 83% of our audience comes from SEO. And buyers come to our site to kind of read that content, whether that's an individual review, a summation of hundreds of reviews, a side-by-side comparison of 2 products, or also maybe they're just trying to understand a product category. So we have a lot of content our research team writes about product categories, and we do sort of summations and synthesis of what's being said about products at a category level as well, to help people understand how to build a shortlist. The big epiphany we had a few years ago was that while reviews are important and necessary, they're not sufficient. And so we've added a lot of other types of content to our site over the last 2 years. And our mission and vision is really to be the one-stop shop for the buyer to do independent research. So we've added pricing data. We've added a lot of video content, including user-generated demos, product tours. We're adding security data to our site. We've added a lot of feature data. So, what we've done is kind of try and deconstruct all the types of research a buyer wants to do and try and provide that information hub for them to do all of that research. And then last but not least, what we found is that buyers often buy in committees and are pretty unstructured and disorganized in terms of how they run their research process. Oftentimes they'll find information and put it in a Google Doc. So we're also building a decisioning framework on top of Trust Radius for someone to kind of collate their research and to organize it into a structured model and to collaborate with their coworkers and essentially score products. So they can build a short list. They can rate different attributes they deem more important. Is usability more important than price, for example? And then they can basically arrive at a structured, logical decision by using both the content, but also the decision-making tools on Trust Radius. And so we're trying to build that safe zone for the buyer to do their research, because we find that that's what they want, right? They want to do as much of their research as they can digitally, anonymously, and only contact sales once they feel ready. And so we're building the platform that aligns to how that buyer wants to buy. Now, to your other point about how do brands engage with us, so we cover about 750 categories of technology, software, and hardware
Wow.
right now. Um, but brands are listed on Trust Radius whether they work with us or not, because we're trying to cover the market, at least those categories that we serve right now. So, thousands and thousands of products have reviews and are listed on Trust Radius right now. But when brands work with us, they get kind of a few benefits. One is beyond the organically generated content that comes from the community, we can work with them to drive content at scale. So it's hard for us to get hundreds of reviews about a product completely independently through our community. But when we work with a company, we will systematically engineer processes to get, lots more reviews by working with them to get embedded in their product, their community, work to source reviews at their events. The second thing we'll do is tailor the questions that are being asked about a product, because we think that's of service to the buyer and the vendor. Most buyers tell us they have a really hard time unpacking the differences between products. Scores don't tell the whole picture by any means. We believe that the narrative and the content about what people express about where a product is great and where it's deficient and how it works for different use cases is critically important. And so we try and tease out those differences by asking intelligent leading questions. And so then that creates an opportunity for a brand to differentiate itself. So if they really excel in one capability, we want to highlight that, because we think that that's useful to a buyer, but it's also useful for a vendor to differentiate itself. So brands work with us first and foremost to build their visibility on our platform and to build their preference by expressing their narrative. The second thing we help them do is take the great content that's generated on Trust Radius and use it inside their organization. There's a product intelligence inside aspects of that. So, there's all the great rich content that's being generated can be used to refine positioning, to refine your product roadmap. But there's also kind of a go-to-market aspect of it. A lot of companies struggle with social proof. We're creating massive volumes of social proof for companies, hundreds of quotes that are usable and approved. And when brands use our content in digital channels, they see goodness, they see conversion lift, they see engagement lift, and they see incremental organic traffic. So we've created a whole framework for brands to take a review on Trust Radius, cut it up into sound bites, into quotes, tag those quotes by theme, competitor, ROI, value props, and then feed that content to their sales team, bleed that content into their digital marketing, and they see a lot of conversion lift as a result. And then the third aspect of our platform for brands is the data. We have remarkable intelligence about who's buying and what they're buying and where they are in their journey. So we can understand which products a company has in consideration, maybe which way they're leaning. Are they doing early research, or are they deep in the research process? And we can feed that data to the brands we work with to be more targeted in their advertising, be more targeted in their sales outreach. And so we help brands action that data to laser in on active buyers. So instead of advertising to your entire ICP, which can be enormous for some of the companies we work with, we help them concentrate their ad spend on those who have the highest propensity to buy, dramatically improving the efficiency of advertising.
Love it. Tell us, how are you disrupting the traditional sales and marketing space in B2B? Are you making the impact that you're hoping to? Because we've got this $1 trillion market in terms of SaaS and cloud and sales and marketing go to market for that, and it's still very old world, very traditional. I mean, I
Yeah,
still see the strategy around just SEO and AdWords and capturing emails and handshaking at events.
yeah,
So, you and a number of companies, I won't mention your competitors, are or
Yeah.
have this, amazing model. Are you disrupting the traditional buying process, or is it taking longer than we had hoped?
I think it's a marathon. Just like it took me 10, 12 years with my first
Right.
company to fundamentally change how nonprofits raise
Mm,
money. And it's not like direct mail and events and major gifts went away. They still persisted. I think the same is true for my sector, right?
mhm.
So, cumulatively we're serving about 12 million people a year now through our platform. If you think
Nice.
about the volume of software purchases, that's a fairly material portion of the number of active sales cycles that are
Mm,
occurring. So in many of the sectors that we serve, we're probably seeing most of the deals that go down in those markets. So there's definite influence occurring. What we're trying to do as a platform is drive increasing share of influence with those
mhm,
buyers, and that's why my whole strategy centers around a being the highest quality source of truth, so making
mhm,
sure my reviews are the most useful, really controlling for fraud, really controlling for bias, which is a
mhm,
significant problem in my industry where vendors
mm,
try and game the system and cherry pick who they send to write reviews. And then again, evolving from being at our core a review platform, which is where we were born 10 years ago, to being a decisioning platform. So trying to, again, understand all the things that buyers are trying to do and serve their needs in those areas, whether it's seeing a demo, whether it's getting product intelligence or security intelligence, um, you know, trying to meet all of their needs. And I'd say we're still in the early innings of this transformation. I think we've made a material dent. Now, I think most companies realize that this is a channel they can't ignore. But human beings are always slow to change. There are going to be early adopters and there are going to be laggards. And it's no different in my industry. We still do a lot of evangelism. There are a lot of companies who are still wed to the old ways of, just solely working with industry analysts. And I think there's a big wake-up call that's occurring where, the more progressive companies have embraced this channel fully. And also, I'd say part of the education is teaching brands that it isn't just about being visible on a site like mine. It's
mm,
about really activating the voice of the customer to
mm.
sell for you. Inherently, buyers trust customers more than brands. And so the really savvy brands aren't just trying to be present on the major review platforms. They realize that collecting content and harnessing that content in their own channels has enormous impact on, again, SEO conversion and win rate. And then I would also say we're still in the first innings in terms of intent data. There's been a lot
Mhm.
of hype around intent data. Obviously, ABM platforms have done extremely well. People are spending enormous amounts of money, though, on channels like display and LinkedIn in untargeted fashion. The
Mm.
brands that we're working with are seeing 40 to 60% uplift in ad effectiveness by using our data. But the adoption rates of intent data in an intelligent fashion in the B2B marketing industry are still very limited right now.
For sure. Um, One of my favorite quotes was, I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, "Trust but verify."
Mm-hmm.
How do you verify, what's being said or claimed? That's a tough one because people are
Yeah.
clever about faking that, as you indicated. What are some of the
Yeah.
modalities for verification?
Yeah. So there are two kind of trust factors we really focus on. One is preventing fraudulent reviews, and the second is mitigating for bias. So in the consumer space on Amazon, you find fake reviews that are engineered by products, product
Mm,
manufacturers, where again the stakes are so high in commerce that they'll go to extreme means to kind of create a false reputation. We don't find that occurs in B2B much, but what we do find is people will write fake reviews to make money. In
mm,
B2B, the industry almost entirely does offer financial incentives to write a review. and that's sort of a necessary evil, because we find that the ask of a reviewer is much higher than a consumer review, right? The average person on Trust Radio spends 22 minutes writing a review. Secondly, the numbers of users of a product is more finite. So we're trying to kind of create a higher yield, right? So it's not like 1 million people are using most products. It might be in the hundreds or thousands. And so if you want to get a representative sample, you have to use incentives. But the use of those incentives then creates a cottage industry of individuals who say, oh, this is a good way to make incremental money. And they will go to great lengths, actually, to create fake profiles on LinkedIn and write reviews that seem credible. So we reject about 35% of the reviews that are contributed to our platform because we identify them as fraudulent. And so we use both software checks and human beings. We have a screening team that vets the reviews. But we're not foolproof. We do see reviews getting through our system. So we've then created mechanisms to kind of lay traps for them, to kind of, I can't go into the details because that would reveal how we do it, but we've created mechanisms to lay traps for people we suspect are fraudulent, but are, highly credible in terms of how they've presented themselves. And so we're constantly trying to quash fraudulent reviews. I feel like we do a better job of it than anyone else in our industry, but it's by no means perfect. We do let fraudulent reviews slip through the cracks and find them thereafter. The second point around trust is the question of bias. So as review platforms, just like Gartner, have become, highly influential in terms of the buyer's decisioning process, it's human nature that vendors will try and game the system. So just like with the Magic Quadrant, you wouldn't ask all customers to kind of speak to the analysts. You'd cherry pick who'd speak to the analysts. Same thing's happening with reviews. And so we inherently see almost all brands institute bias into their review generation. So we have to, if we're going to be the source of truth, we have to mitigate that. So we do three things. One is we source a lot of reviews independently. 47% of the reviews in our platform we source completely independently from our community, unrelated to reviews driven by vendors. Secondly, we created an algorithm 5 years ago now where we put a lot more weight on independent reviews. Independent review in our scoring algorithm is worth 100 times more than a vendor-driven review, which makes it hard for a vendor to manipulate their scores. And then thirdly, we've tried to create carrots and motivation for vendors to do the right thing. So we created a program called True, where if a vendor was seen to and tested that they were genuinely driving reviews from all customers, they'd earn this certification, and then their reviews would actually get treated like independent reviews in the algorithm. And so we've had a lot of big companies, medium companies sort of join that program because they realize that ultimately it's the right thing to do, that gaming the system might give you short-term reputational benefits, but ultimately products are going to win and lose on their actual veracity and effectiveness. And, if you're misleading the buyer, eventually it comes back to bite you. So you're almost better embracing transparency and then reacting to the market feedback from reviews that may not be glowing and using that intelligence to improve your product. And so we spend an enormous amount of energy on that. Oftentimes brands get pissed off with us because we do that moderation. They want to be able to manipulate the system. And there are sites that they can do that on very easily. They can't on Trust Radius, and it annoys them, but it's the right thing for us to do. Our true north is serving the buyer. And we believe fundamentally we're going to build a more valuable company in the long term that more brands will feel they have to work with because we do a better job of serving the buyer.
Brilliant approach. Let's talk about buyer personas. When I was selling 30 years ago, it was all about, getting to the CEO, the CIO, but that's changed, right? I mean, who's buying software services infrastructure today? It's not just about the CIO, CTO anymore, is it?
It's highly distributed, right? So if we think about, just prior to even concepts like product-led growth, SaaS led to a proliferation of products to serve more discrete business needs. So the buyers shifted from being IT to being the functions, and they also shifted from being the C-level executive to being the frontline users. And so, products are still bought in committees depending on their purchase value, but the end users and certainly the business functions, the direct users of the technology, have much more bearing than ever before. And the advent of being able to trial products, the advent of being able to sort of buy limited seats and scale, obviously products like Slack or Calendly have really driven, again, catalyzed this idea of products get adopted on the front lines in business functions, they prove success, and then they scale up. And so, we see different personas using our site, across business segments. It's certainly IT is probably 15, 20% of the users on our site, but, all business functions are represented. And we see people at all levels, C-suites, directors, but also frontline users, because they're the makeup of who's making product decisions today.
Yeah, fantastic. It's great to see the democratization of what used to be a very rigid and inflexible landscape. Let's talk a little bit about your team. I saw this picture here on your website. So what a fun group. Um, what do you guys are in Austin? How's the outlook in Austin these days for tech, for lifestyle, for hiring? I miss Southwest. I hope it's coming back. I think maybe this year.
It is, yeah.
What's up in Austin these days?
Um, Austin remains sort of a vibrant city.
Mm.
Interestingly, my team is now distributed 50% in other cities.
All right.
At the beginning of COVID, we decided that it actually represented an opportunity to move faster with hiring and remove the geographical constraints of where people got hired. And so, pre-COVID, maybe 15% of my team was remote, and now it's 50%. So
Right.
we are a remote first culture. We until recently had a physical office in Austin. And we found that even though 50% of our team were in Austin, we simply weren't using it very
Mm.
much
Mm.
because, for different reasons. One is we're a sprawling city and people live in all parts of town. So for some of them, it was a long commute to come into the office. And then for others like me, I'm only 10 minutes away, but this little guy became so dependent on me and
High maintenance. Yeah, absolutely.
looked so sad whenever I left my home that I just felt guilty going into the office. So everyone has their own reasons. It could be, easier access to kind of help with their kids or, again, the commute. And so we made a decision just recently to shut our office and move to a fully remote model, and instead trying ways to kind of, create socialization through in-person meetings for the folks here in Austin. And, one thing we did earlier this year was we flew everyone to Austin for a few days of meetings and for socialization. So rather than spending money on real estate, we've decided to take those funds, be more efficient, and put them towards sort of teaming and bringing people together. I still think it's hugely important to bring people together in a physical world. But we've just found that the office isn't a necessary construct for that, for us.
Yeah, such a great point, and really enjoyed spending time on your website. And by the way, I was going through the site in preparation here and was checking out your bio. MBA from Harvard Business School down the road from me here in Boston. Master's from Stanford and undergrad at Cambridge University. Why shoot so low? Were you not an overachiever as a young person?
Indian parents push me,
Yes. Well, you're not a doctor or an engineer, so you're kind of a failure at the end of the day,
exactly. Right? Yeah.
Nothing for your kids to live up to there. No high expectations, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could say it's a good thing, or you could say I was too risk averse, right? I did the safe thing and am overly educated. I think as a young kid in my teens, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Richard Branson growing up in the UK was one of my idols.
Right.
I
Of
had I
course.
had a little side gig business when I was in high school, but I think it took me until I was 28 to have the courage to start my first company. And actually, I don't share this with everyone. The reason I started my first company was that I was fired from a company here in
Oh.
Austin that I had just joined from business school because I was a bad culture fit. And sometimes some of us need a bit of a kick in the butt to actually do what
Uh,
we're intended to do in life. And that was my story for
what an
sure.
interesting story, and I really enjoyed our chat. Can't wait to see you. Hopefully, something like South by. But thanks so much for your time and insights, and for sharing your mission with my viewers. I look forward to catching you on Twitter, where you're pretty active, and on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Evan. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so
Good to
much.
meet you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for